Johnny Carson was the undisputed monarch of late-night television. For 30 years, The Tonight Show was his kingdom, and his approval was the crown jewel every aspiring comic dreamed of earning. With one wave of his hand, Carson could turn an anonymous club performer into a household name overnight. From Robin Williams to Joan Rivers, countless careers were launched from his stage. But there was one comedian Carson never welcomed into his court, Jerry Seinfeld. Despite Seinfeld's meteoric rise and the record-shattering success of his sitcom, Carson's disdain for him ran deep. Behind the glittering lights of television, a quiet feud simmered between the most powerful gatekeeper in comedy and the man who claimed to make a show about nothing. Why did Carson, a figure admired for his charm and generosity toward fellow comedians, take such a dislike to Seinfeld? The answer is not only about personalities but about a clash of values, a collision of two entirely different visions of what comedy should be. Tonight, we're peeling back the curtain on one of Hollywood's most fascinating unspoken rivalries, Johnny Carson versus Jerry Seinfeld. The story begins in 1993. 38 years old, Jerry Seinfeld was the king of Thursday nights. His sitcom dominated ratings, critics hailed him as a genius of observational humor, and his influence stretched across Hollywood. But during this pinnacle of success, Seinfeld entered into a relationship that ignited public controversy. He was nearly 40. She was 17. Her name was Shoshana Lonstein, a high school student he met by chance in Central Park. Two became inseparable, photographed in intimate settings long before she turned 18. Though Seinfeld insisted nothing physical occurred until she was of legal age, the optics were unavoidable. One of America's most powerful entertainers was openly dating a teenager. To the public, it was uncomfortable. To Johnny Carson, it was unacceptable. Carson, then nearing the end of his career, had built his reputation as a figure parents could trust, someone who carried himself with class and discretion. To him, a middle-aged man courting someone barely out of high school wasn't edgy or romantic, it was tacky. In Carson's old-school world, entertainers had unwritten rules and Jerry had broken them. When a Tonight Show monologue joke about Seinfeld's relationship landed flat, Carson swiftly ordered his writers never to bring up the subject again. He wouldn't dignify it with airtime. As one NBC executive recalled, Johnny tolerated a lot, but that crossed a line. Dating someone still in high school went against everything he represented. Even major outlets like People and Newsweek questioned the relationship's appropriateness, and though it lasted 4 years, the stain on Seinfeld's image never fully faded. For Carson, who valued dignity above scandal, the incident cemented his distaste. And here's where I want to pause and ask you something. Do you think Johnny Carson was right to quietly distance himself from Jerry Seinfeld over that relationship? Or do you see it as a private matter that shouldn't have affected his standing in comedy? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to know what you think. But Carson's disapproval went deeper than Seinfeld's personal life. Behind the smile and the catchphrases, Jerry's off-camera persona often rubbed people the wrong way. Those who worked with him described a man who was distant, clinical, even dismissive. While he was always punctual and professional, he rarely engaged with staff, seldom expressed gratitude, and seemed to keep an invisible barrier between himself and everyone else. Carson, by contrast, was the opposite. Despite being the biggest star on television, he knew the names of stagehands, asked about their families, and treated every crew member with genuine respect. To him, television was a collaborative effort, and success meant nothing without humility. Backstage, the contrast between the two men was striking. Johnny loved comedians who could laugh at themselves, who had depth beyond their jokes. Jerry, in Carson's eyes, had wit, but not warmth. This difference became glaring during a roundtable discussion where Seinfeld mocked fellow comics like Jay Leno and David Letterman for trying too hard to connect with audiences. Crowd laughed, but Carson's smile was thin. As one witness remembered, the room went cold. Everyone knew Johnny hated that kind of arrogance. For Carson, dismissing peers wasn't a sign of confidence, it was a sign of insecurity. The divide grew even sharper when it came to wealth. Johnny Carson was, by the 1980s, the highest-paid entertainer in television. But he lived with relative modesty, preferring privacy over displays of luxury. He believed flaunting money created distance between comedian and audience. As one colleague recalled, Carson often said, "You don't get funnier when your garage gets bigger." Comedy to him came from shared experience, not excess. Seinfeld, however, embraced wealth as part of his persona. His love for luxury cars became legendary. His fortune from reruns openly celebrated, and entire shows like Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee were built around the trappings of his riches. To Carson, this obsession with material success revealed a disconnect from ordinary people, the very people comedy was supposed to serve. For Johnny, you stopped being funny the moment you stopped being relatable. The tension didn't end there. In later years, Jerry openly dismissed the traditional talk show format that Carson had perfected: the desk, the couch, the monologue. Seinfeld called it outdated and insincere, positioning his own series as the real way to interview comedians. He never mentioned Carson by name, but to insiders the insult was obvious. Johnny, who had given Jerry one of his first big breaks on The Tonight Show, was deeply wounded. To dismiss the very format that made his career was, in Carson's eyes, an act of disrespect. As he reportedly quipped in retirement, "Without talk shows, Jerry would still be performing in pizza parlors." But perhaps the most fundamental difference between them lay in their approach to comedy itself. Carson championed comedians who bared their souls: Richard Pryor's raw honesty, George Carlin's sharp social critique, Robin Williams' manic vulnerability. He believed great comedy came from truth, from pain, struggle, and the messy depths of human experience. Jerry Seinfeld had no interest in any of that. He proudly admitted he avoided politics, emotion, and vulnerability. "I'm not interested in feelings," he once said. "I'm interested in funny." To Carson, this was the very definition of superficiality. Comedy wasn't just about escaping reality, it was about transforming it, helping people feel less alone. Seinfeld's deliberate detachment struck Johnny as hollow, a path of least resistance for a man who valued polish over depth. Carson's admiration for Norm Macdonald illustrates this contrast perfectly. Long after retiring, Johnny called Norm the only comedian who reminded him of himself: dry, fearless, uncompromising. Norm wasn't afraid to bomb if it meant staying true to his voice. That authenticity moved Carson in ways Seinfeld never could. When Macdonald passed away in 2021, tributes poured in from across the comedy world. Seinfeld, however, remained silent. Not even a tweet. To Carson's generation, that silence said everything about Jerry's character: brilliant but cold, lacking the generosity of spirit that binds comedians together. In the end, this quiet feud was about more than two men. Symbolized a larger shift in American entertainment. Carson came from an era when fame carried responsibility: to your audience, to your peers, to your craft. Seinfeld represented the new era, technically flawless, wildly successful but detached and self-contained. Both men achieved legendary status, yet one key difference remained. While dozens of lesser talents earned Carson's sacred invitation to the couch, Jerry Seinfeld never received that gesture of approval. He had the fame, the fortune, the influence, but never Johnny Carson's blessing. Carson once summed it up simply: there are comedians who make you laugh until you cry. And there are comedians who make you laugh until you think. The great ones do both. I'm still waiting for Jerry to make me think. So which legacy resonates more with you? Carson's warmth and humanity, or Seinfeld's cool precision? That question may tell us as much about comedy as it does about America itself.